BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast, where the National Audit Office warns that the government has no long-term strategy for dealing with animal disease outbreaks.
What I think our report shows is the insufficient level of preparedness for a major outbreak of animal disease, which potentially could happen if foot and mouth were to get in.
The government's Animal Health Agency says it'll study the report and its recommendations. We'll have more on that a little later. First, though, today, the artificial fertilisers that farmers put on their crops are generally produced using the energy-intensive Haber-Bosch method. It involves using nitrogen from the air and hydrogen from natural gas, mixed under huge pressure and very high temperatures. The process has a large carbon footprint, roughly 1% of global CO2 emissions. Well, this week we're hearing about innovations in farming, and research is currently underway to find a biological alternative to chemical fertiliser. Our reporter Howard Shannon has been to Rothamsted Research in Hertfordshire to meet Dr. Marine Valton, co-founder and CEO of Nurisol, an algae-based solution.
During production of chemical fertilizers with the Haber-Bosch process, basically you are producing a lot of CO2, and once the chemical fertilizers are applied on the field, there's a lot of emissions as well, because the nitrogen is being really released and not taken up by the plants. So up to 50% actually at least is just released into the environment and not taken up by the plants, which means a lot of environmental damages. As a contrary, actually, our products capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and share it with the crops.
So, Marine, I can see some bottles here with a green algae bubbling away in them here in your laboratory, but I suspect you've scaled up production to a bigger scale, haven't you? Can we go and have a look at that?
Yes, definitely.
So we're now entering one of the larger greenhouses here at Rothamsted. So, Marine, describe to me, what can I see in front of me? There's a large cylinder about 2 metres high. There's a green algae bubbling away inside it. What's happening here?
You have big photobioreactors, so big reactors where the algae growing. So we put them, we add water, we add the algae, and then we are bubbling CO2 and nitrogen, we're bubbling air basically, which contains CO2 and nitrogen, which the algae are using to grow, and that produce our end product, the fertilizer.
We should stress that the idea behind your fertilizer is it's a live, living fertilizer on the field, which interacts with the bacteria in the soil.
Yes.
What's unique about this?
So basically, the way we are doing this is by going to the farmers' fields and find the best algae there. The best algae, the one with the best fertilizing capacities, but also the one which improve soil health the best. If you have 1 gram of soil, you're gonna find 5 million algae. So, there's a lot of choice, but we find the best one there. And from this, we scale up their production in those big reactors and then harvest them and formulate them into a final product, which once applied to the field is going to be able to continue capture carbon dioxide and nitrogen to share it with the plant and the soil to improve, the yield, but also the soil health. In our field trials, in partnership with farmers, we've seen a 21% increase in yield compared to the chemical fertilizers.
Now, I appreciate this is a commercially sensitive product. It's still at the development stage, so I'm not expecting you to reveal the finances as such, but generally speaking, would it be cheaper or the same price for a farmer to use this as traditional fertilizer?
Our aim is really to actually match the price of chemical fertilizers.
And your timescale for this, when might this all come together, do you think?
Within the next 2 years, we'll really be able to scale up and work with more and more farmers for commercialization.
Dr. Marine Valton from Rothamsted Research. Now, I'm not sure I ever thought I would say this, but this Friday the World Foot Trimming Cup is taking place near Barcelona, the culmination of a 2-day international Hoof Health and Welfare Conference. Yes, just like nail parlours, foot trimming for farm animals has escaped the everyday and become an art form, with trimmers from 18 different countries taking part. Representing England will be Dave Phillips from Dorset, who's also Vice Chairman of the National Association of Cattle Foot Trimmers. He's off to Spain today, so our reporter Fiona Clampin caught up with him before he left home.
I'm just going to go through the routine trim here. I do toe length first. That gives me my length of toe, that then I can work out all the next steps, sole thickness, and then moving on to the modelling. So I'm going to use the grinder for this. Then I'll move on to my next step, which is the modelling. When we say modelling, what we mean is we're sort of dishing out the sole of the foot towards the heel and taking the weight off of pressure points in the foot, trying to get the weight around the outside of the foot is where we want it, not on the centre of the sole.
It's almost like you're peeling a potato.
Yes, very similar. So yeah,
That's what it looks like anyway.
so wrist movements and yeah, just taking a little bit of horn away. Got a really sharp knife, which makes this job really easy. It's what you leave behind, not what you're taking off really. So I'm just trying to get a really nice shaped foot, well balanced, but leave plenty of horn there, not compromise any sole thickness, and just create a nice balanced foot with increased angle and weight in the right areas really. So I'll put this foot down and I'll pick up the next one. So move to the back right.
So it's about weight distribution, making sure that they feel okay on their feet?
Yeah, that's it. So we're keeping cows in what would be, slightly unnatural environment. We're asking them to walk on concrete, stand for periods of time in collecting yards, those sort of things. So we're just trying to maximise what we can do to help that foot be in a natural position and a natural shape.
You're going to this competition in Spain for the first time. How are you feeling about it?
Excited, a little bit nervous, I guess. Really looking forward to it. So there'll be some of the best foot trimmers in the world there. So yeah, it's going to be exciting and hopefully learn a lot as well.
And for the competition, do you have to demonstrate certain skills? How will you be judged? I think that's the question, really.
I think the way they're going to do it, we'll be paired up on a crush. One of us will trim a front foot, one will do a back foot. There's a sort of time limit of 90 seconds, but it's not all about time. It's more about showing your skills, trimming that foot correctly within a time period, making sure the measurements are correct.
Are you confident?
Yeah, a hard question really. Yeah, hope so. I did well in the UK heat, so hopefully I stand a chance in the world heat. Yeah, last time the UK representative came second, so I'm hoping to go one better and hopefully we can bring the golden hoof back to the UK.
The golden hoof. We wish Dave Phillips from Dorset the very best of luck. The government is unlikely to be able to cope with a severe outbreak of animal disease like foot and mouth, according to the National Audit Office. In a new report, it says key public bodies, including the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs and the Animal and Plant Health Agency, or APHA, have been working so hard to manage outbreaks of diseases like avian flu over the last 6 years that long-term resilience is being undermined and there's no long-term strategy. The report highlights significant gaps in government contingency plans, including outdated and inefficient operational processes within APHA, out-of-date infrastructure, particularly relating to the government's animal science facility at Weybridge, which won't be updated for a decade, and a skills shortage. I asked Richard Sullivan-Jones, Director at the National Audit Office, if the UK was prepared for an outbreak.
What I think our report shows is the insufficient level of preparedness for a major outbreak of animal disease, which potentially could happen if foot and mouth were to get in.
The report highlights significant gaps, doesn't it, in contingency plans. It also talks about outdated and inefficient operational processes within the Animal, Plant and Health Agency, some out-of-date infrastructure, shortage of vets, things like that. So what should the priorities be then for the government to look at?
But part of the problem is that the government has struggled to set priorities. It's sort of been in firefighting mode, really. Its whole model of operation for this work is that people who normally would work on things like updating contingency plans and so on will sort of pivot and switch to responding to an outbreak when an outbreak occurs. But in recent years, outbreaks are occurring most of the time, and that wasn't the case in the past, and it wasn't the plan. So there's just been much less time for a lot of that more strategic prioritisation, and there is no long-term strategy. The government does not have a strategy for animal diseases.
You also mentioned the skills shortage, a lack of vets. What impact does that have on tackling or preventing an outbreak?
I think the latest vacancy rate for APHA vets is 24%, which compares to sort of the wider private sector average of 10% vacancies. So that is a challenge, because not only in terms of dealing with an outbreak, but also some of that, as you say, preventative work, and that supporting improvements in animal health on farms and in livestock markets. The fewer you have that have a specialism, and the more time they have to spend responding to outbreaks, the less time they have and the less capacity they have to really work on that longer term preventative approach and that sort of long-term resilience.
How much does this long-term lack of planning come down to money?
So it's an excellent question, because a simplistic response might be put more resource in and that will help. And perhaps it might help a little. But I think, APHA's vet vacancy rate is a good example of the fact that in principle they have the budget to fund a certain number of vets, but they cannot recruit and retain enough vets to fill those positions. So it's not a simple question of more money. There may be a need for targeted investment in improving things. You also mentioned some of the sort of outdated processes and systems that APHA uses. This includes things like paper-based mechanisms for recording information around infections and testing, things that can really sort of slow down the very early stages of spotting an infection and stopping the spread. Now, having more money won't help resolve the fact that the information needs to be recorded in a paper form and then manually input by someone else into a computer system. So there may be a need for targeted investment in the short term to really streamline some of those systems and processes. Now, what the priorities are, that will ultimately be up to government. I think the problem is they haven't really worked through what the priorities are.
So how worried are you about all this? I mean, you're building a picture of an organisation with several different agencies and the department itself sort of managing things, but not actually looking forward to over the horizon of what might happen.
I think that's fair. I wouldn't want to overstate the level of risk and suggest we should be up at night having nightmares over it. But the risk has been increasing. It appears on the government's national risk register. I don't think DEFRA and the Animal and Plant Health Agency are unaware of that, and I think they are taking it seriously. They just haven't prioritised it to date.
Richard Sullivan-Jones from the National Audit Office. In response to the report, DEFRA told us this government's commitment to maintaining the country's biosecurity in the face of mounting risks of disease is unwavering. We will do whatever it takes to protect our farmers and economy. It goes on. After years of underinvestment, we're investing £200 million into a new National Biosecurity Centre. And Jenny Stewart, APHA's chief executive, thanked the NAO for the report and said, "We will study the findings in detail so the UK can remain at the forefront of surveillance, diagnostics, research and rapid response." That's all from us. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Heather Simons. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.